our escape during the war. An escape that lasted 7 years. And it started literally on the second day of the war. But I had a nanny. She saved our lives, there's no question about that. She saved Papa's life as well. Ellie was very, very devoted, particularly to me and to Lily. She literally saved us. We were her children throughout the years of the war, no matter where we went. Meine Kinder. I really regret not having talked to her more. She would have told me many more stories. I regret not having talked to my father more. But that's something, that's why I'm here to talk. I'm just extremely proud of my father and the nerve he had with all the 6 years to survive under very, very, very trying and difficult circumstances. I don't know how he did it. I would never have been able to do it, I don't think so. My name is Roman Gessler. I was born February 6, 1937 in Bbielsko-Biała, which is a town in Upper Silesia, Poland. I was born a little bit prematurely. And my brother and sister were all taken care of when my mother gave birth in Bochnia, at grandmother's. She always arranged it. So I was supposed to be born in Bochnia as well. But I came a little bit early. And the story goes, of course, at home. We didn't go to hospitals in those days. And so my brother Elik put two chairs together and a blanket and put me there. And that was my first crib. And there I had my first little nap. My father came from a very Orthodox background. In fact, he was the first one to cut his side locks off when he turned 18. In effect, our home before the war was also a kosher home. We had a separation of Fleischig, Milchig in the kitchen and all the things. My mother particularly was really religious. We were quite a wealthy family. My father had produced liqueurs, and he was part of a very large corporation that was really world-renowned. And they were the purveyors to the imperial court. And my father had built up the Polish operation and acquired it fully. He was fully in charge of that. We lived in a very nice building on Matejko. My brother went to shul, he went to cheder. Lily not yet, because she was only 5, so she didn't do that. But my brother was also very, he was already 11 at the time. He was a very precocious boy, read a lot, very quickly. He could swallow pages at one look. Very close to mother, and they both had a lot of reading lessons together and were very close to each other. Incidentally, my mother had a little, what they used to call a salon. I don't know how big it was and how famous it was, but my remote cousin later on told me that Martin Buber came to our house, and Max Brod came to our house. So it may have been a nice little literary thing, and my brother was very much with it. At that time, late August, Papa and Mommy went on vacation to the Lido in Italy. So when war broke out, there was a little bit of a problem getting back because the branches were, of course, closed. But I had a nanny, and my nanny took me and my sister Lily to our grandmother in Bochnia. My nanny, Elisabeth Leah, came to us in 38. So she was with me in 39, and she came from Katowice. She was Roman Catholic, an old established German family of Upper Silesia. As I said, Eli took us to Bochnia, to grandmother. But anyway, Papa and Mommy, they came via Hungary. They actually arrived in Bochnia probably on the 3rd or 4th of September. And Papa immediately went and bought some tickets on a train that went east. Of course, everybody wanted to go east because from the west came the Germans. And there came one of my first memories, because we were waiting for the train at the station in Bochnia, and I remember being held by somebody, and there came this bulging black locomotive with the rattling little cars behind them, you know, with all the carriages behind it. And I was astounded, I was absolutely astounded seeing this huge monstrous thing coming. But I wasn't afraid. And that train went up to Tarnów, which was not too far towards the east. And then we all disembarked. My grandmother had been with us, and her son David, my uncle David, which was my mother's brother. And my father looked to go further east and found a guy, a lost bus driver. He had come from Krakow, and now the war was all over the place, so he didn't know what to do. So Papa paid him a nice amount of money, and he took us, family, that means my mother, my father, Tante Eli, and my sister, my brother, and myself, to Lvov. So we arrived there sometime around the first week of September. It was the first leg of a very long trek. right at the beginning, maybe probably on the 20th of September, we were bombarded from all sides. As you know, Poland was divided through the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact into two areas, and the war was still going on. Poland had not yet capitulated. So Papa and us all were standing on the corner of the street in Lemberg, and a car came by and stopped in front, and it turned out it was a friend of Papa's. And he told them, listen, come quickly with us, because they are picking up people in the middle of the streets to take them into the Polish army to fight the Germans. We are going to Buchach, which is not too far away. So Papa gave Mommy some money, said goodbye, hopped into the car and disappeared. The 23rd happens to be the Erev of Yom Kippur. We all went to the hotel. We lived in a hotel there, and Mommy went on her fast. About 2 days later, on the 25th of September, she wanted to visit some friends. She asked my brother if he would come with her, and he said, no, he was involved in the book. So she went to the Löfflers, family that we knew in Lvov. And unfortunately, they were not home. The little girl opened the door and said, I'm sorry, my parents are not here. And I am not allowed to let anybody in. And so my mother asked her for a glass of water because she didn't feel that well. And so the girl went to bring a glass of water. When she came back, she just saw Mother jumping out of the window into the yard. A real tragedy, because she left a desolate husband, an 11-year-old boy, 5-year-old girl, and me. I was only 2.5. And they didn't tell me what happened to her for a long time. What does a little boy know about these things? So they said, she left. But I always wanted to see her, to meet with her. And I was years later asking Ellie what happened to Mommy. Well, that was a huge tragedy. Papa came back the next day on the 26th, devastated when he heard the news. By the way, that was the day when the Russians moved into Lvov. Ellie, she came with us from Bochnia and Bilic to Lvov. And the war had broken out, and she didn't know what to do. And then when my mother died, a couple of weeks later, she wrote to her mother and asked what to do. There are 3 little children here and no mother. And the mother said, well, why don't you stay with them? So Ellie stayed with us in Lvov. Papa opened up a factory for spices and had a roasting thing for coffee. Coffee was very rare in those days, so if you had some coffee, that was a very good thing. And many friends who had come or escaped, or Jews who had escaped from the West, he employed and gave them, in effect, a certificate of employment so that they could stay instead of being deported to Siberia. we had to leave Lvov. There was no question about it. Papa got himself some papers saying that he was dealing in German uniforms. He had to collect German uniforms, I don't know, to mend them or to whatever. And he got a neighbor who had a little truck, and he gave him 10 kilos of coffee and asked him to get us towards the south. Basically, we wanted to go towards the Hungarian border. By December of 41, middle of December, we moved out of Lvov on a little truck. Eli, my brother Elik, my sister Lily, and I were up in the back. Papa was in front in the cabin with the driver. It was an open tender type of thing. And we went towards La Turca. And there we were held up by German gendarmerie, or was it could have been the army. And all I can say is that I looked out and saw the soldiers by the cabin, and there I saw Papa pull out his arm and shouting Heil Hitler. Of course, he spoke fluent German. He showed them the papers that he had to get uniforms, and so they let us go. It was not the first time we had encountered the Germans or the Gestapo, and it was not the last time. We stayed in there a few days. Papa was hiding in a cupboard, I believe, and then he took my brother Elik and made contact with somebody on the other side, on a little bit further by the German border, and went in that winter of 1941-42 on foot over the Carpathian Mountains. And he left Ellie and Lily and me behind, saying, we can't go all together. Let me go first. If it's okay, you come after. Well, we didn't hear from him for about 2 months. And then one day in the evening, we got a cart, a horse with a cart and a kutscher. And I remember that very well. Eli sat next to him. Lily and I were in the back on the hay. It was one of these V-shaped, typical Polish carts, you know. And we were on our backs. We looked up at the sky. It was still very cold. But anyway, off we went. And came to a nice, some old little hut. And there were 2 guys in there, and they were our guides to take us over the mountains. So one guy took the suitcase, the other guy took me on his shoulders because I was too little. And Ellie and Lily had to trudge up the mountains. And I went up on top of that mountain, and another mountain, and another up, and another down. And at one time, I heard all these kind of weird howls, and I tapped my man on the head and said, what are these howls? And he said, don't worry, it's just wolves. Then I tapped him again later on and said, I can't see Ellie, I can't see Lily. What happened? So we stopped and waited, and slowly Ellie came up with the other guy with the suitcase, and Lily was lost. And there she was, and she said, no, we aren't going to go. They said, we must go. There are patrols all over the place, and it's terribly dangerous. No, you'll go down, find that little girl. Lily was 7. Sure enough, they found her nearly exhausted, and they brought her up. And we continued at our track. By the morning, we had arrived basically on a hill above the house of the priest that we were supposed to go to. He was an Orthodox priest with a wife and 2 children at the time. And then after a few days, he had a horse and a cart. So he took us to Mukachevo, to Munkac. At the time, we went to the train station and he bought us tickets to Budapest. And he sent with us, I believe it was his sister, one of his sisters, who of course spoke fluent Hungarian, and we went to the train, and the train took off. And in the middle, of course, during the journey, the Hungarian gendarmerie came and to check everybody out. Eli said, well, fall asleep immediately, asleep. So we closed our eyes as if we were asleep, and somehow that woman saved us, telling some story, because we didn't have a passport, we didn't have anything. In the train, they checked everybody, but this woman had tickets. I don't know what else she told them. We were 2 little children, you know, they're sick children, they're taken to the doctor. I don't know what story she told them, but we arrived in Budapest around midnight. But anyway, we arrived there. Papa was overjoyed. I was overjoyed. I saw him coming. I was 5 years old. At that time, Papa, he wants to get the hell out of there, and so he finds a way. He gets himself some certificate that he is affiliated with the French army. And we ended up in August of 1944. There was another trek, and we got into the car of the assistant Romanian consul in Budapest to get to the border. We crossed the border, and we ended up in a small place called Arad. It's a town not too far from the border there. Well, it so happens that we had to leave Arad, and we took a train to Bucharest. And I remember looking out of the window, we saw the aeroplanes coming, and I saw the burning city of Cluj. The whole horizon was burning. And I remember looking up, and I saw the plane flying very, very low. And my brother Elik was with me. I said, that's an American. He saw the star of the American. We arrived maybe at 8 o'clock in the evening, some 7 or 8 o'clock, and it was terrible. The whole street was burning. Imagine a street with buildings of 3, 5, 6 stores there. The whole thing was burning. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. On the 6th day we went to a building and we went down to a cellar. It had 3 cellars actually, three layers. Went to the downstairs cellar. So we were down there, Ellie and Lily and I. Papa was outside again, watching for the bombs, and with Elik. And we were talking to Ellie, we were chatting around, and the people heard German. So they sent a message up, saying, there are Germans down here, Germans down here. So they didn't know what, so they sent out the military down. Sure enough, they came, the Romanian militia came down, pushed everybody aside, stood in front of us, put us against the wall. They said, we are Germans, put us against the wall. And wanted to execute us. And I remember looking at the guy in front of me, because he had a gun. And he had the thing, and he put the bullet in it, put it like that. So we stand there, and he was waiting for the command to shoot. And then a big shout came up from top, and I see Papa coming down, waving the passport, Amerikanski, Amerikanski. And I look at him and said, American? American, American, not German. Ah, American. The first liberating Americans in Bucharest. They took us out. They took us with us. There was an honor guard with us. Took us to the hotel. The hotel was completely damaged. I can't remember the name of the hotel, Bristol or something. But the first floor had 2 or 3 rooms still standing. So this is where we went. And after 7 days, we had a room. I remember I walked with Papa in Bucharest on 8th of May, 1945, and Papa said to me, Hazele, my little hare, today we have peace. And I look up at him and say, what is peace? So that was the end of the official war, not for us though, because now in Romania we had that little problem, where do we go? I was a nice little boy, but with the bombardment in Lvov and the disappearance of my mother, and later on the scramble and the shouts and all the war things that happened, and the endless bombardment we later had also in Lvov, all of that got me very, very frightened as a little boy, and got me physically and psychologically right off the rocker. It wasn't recognized at the time as such. We didn't know, people didn't know much about it. I used to wet my bed constantly. Nothing helped. In fact, it didn't help until I got into the army. Would you believe it? At 18. I volunteered in the Israeli army to be a paratrooper, to jump from aeroplanes. Not just because my brother was one of the first 10 parachutists in Israel, but also because I had to overcome that fear. And once you're up there, it's immaterial if you are afraid or not. The height is overwhelming. So it was really a long, long trek. Ellie was very, very devoted, particularly to me and to Lily. She saved our lives, there's no question about that. She saved Papa's life as well, a number of times, because of her. She wasn't afraid. She simply wasn't afraid. I'm just extremely proud of my father and the nerve he had with all the 6 years to survive under very, very, very trying and difficult circumstances. So the lesson really here is there is no question that there is nothing that you cannot overcome. Don't succumb to anything. Don't give up ever, ever. Don't give up.